Good evening, everybody. It's getting later in the evening, just winding down, getting ready to call it a day. And Willis and I are hanging out here, giving him a couple snacks. Here, you want a couple of these? Here, come here. So we're just hanging out. And I thought before I went to bed that I would go ahead and read something that I had to write. Um, uh, Possibly for an evaluation that I'm going to do. I'm not sure yet. Still kind of on the fence on that. I don't know if that's going to be the best thing for me. But one of the reasons I wrote this is because the two main questions that I'm asked about being targeted is who is targeting you, who's doing it, and why are you so important that this is happening to you? And if you're targeted, you know the answer to that. You don't have to have a good reason why somebody is targeting you. You could be just a science experiment. They're trying to see how much you'll take. It's been proven over time through government documents that have been released that these kind of experiments do take place. Trauma-based mind control, etc., etc. It's happened over and over with MK Ultra. Experiments on kids, stuff like that. This targeting, it's non-discriminate. I don't know how to say that. And it's late. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what religion you are. Anything. But there are some specific reasons why people have been targeted. Now, in my case, I do have some specific reasons through family history that I could be targeted. And my glasses are quicker here. I've been reading so much on my computer and reading stuff like this. And I'm over 40 now, and your eyes start to go a little bit, so I went and got some glasses. They're basically just readers. They're not, they just magnify. So, but it does help me. Anyway, I wrote down some family history here. A lot of family, my mom and dad had secret clearances, top secret clearances. I don't know how high they went. But the facilities they worked at, I'm sure they were pretty high, especially my dad's. I don't know, both of them, I'm not sure. But thought of other family members that were around DoD projects, contractors and stuff like that had high clearances. And when you have family members, or yourself, if you have a secret clearance and you possibly know some information that they don't want to get out, they will follow you and monitor you, and or character assassinate you to make sure that if you do say any of the information that you were privy to, that you're not credible if you happen to say anything about it. They can say, that guy's crazy. And if you're targeted, you've probably heard that word more than anything, because that's the go-to answer for anybody that is participating in active denial, or somebody that just doesn't understand this, and they've been conditioned to automatically think that if somebody has some new information that they don't understand, that person's crazy. They have a tinfoil hat. They have some kind of mental issue that just write them off as crazy. And Sir Isaac Newton discovered gravity, and they called him crazy. So anyway, here's I'm just going to read this about my family history. All right. My dad was an RD-3 in the Navy. That is a radar technician. I don't know exactly what he did in the Navy as a radar technician, what that encompasses, what you do as a radar technician, but that's what he did. Tracking aircraft or something like that. So he started off with job radar. After that, he was a crash fire rescue firefighter at Plant 42 in Palmdale, one of the most secret known facilities in the United States. I visited the fire department several times as a young child with my dad. I rode with him in his crash truck at a local parade once. This is a link to the full documentary about the plant. So I just put this link here to Plant 42. Now, Plant 42 was the research and development facility where they worked on all of these super top secret black projects that nobody knew about. You know, before we knew about the SR-71 Blackbird, it was being developed at Plant 42. And when they tested it, they would take it over to Area 51 or Site 51 and test it out over there. It's one of the most top secret facilities in the United States that we know of, that the public knows of now. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that's underground and other places out in the middle of nowhere that nobody's ever heard of, and you know, that's fine. They need to put some stuff out there where nobody can find anything. He worked private security at Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works. During that time, he guarded the SR-71. Probably know what you're talking about. It's the SR-71 Blackbird, the B-1 bomber, and I'm sure other aircraft I don't know about. The Skunk Works was an area where they built the actual aircraft. After they did the research development, they built these projects, and they were compartmentalized, so the people working on that aircraft didn't know what aircraft they were working on. They knew that they were working on this specific part, and that was their job. When the project was done, maybe they knew what rolled out. Maybe they didn't for, you know, a while until it was fully tested and it was, you know, let out to the public. After that, he worked private security for a company called Rocketdyne. Rocketdyne made they built the engines of the space shuttle for NASA. I never got to visit the Skunk Works facility, but I did get a tour of the Rocketdyne facility. I remember 55-gallon drums full of sediment that would build up on the end of fuel pipes. It resembled a piece of coral. And they just had, they'd test these engines, and when they'd run the fuel through these pipes, this stuff would build up on the end of the pipes, and it would grow like this piece of coral, just like if you go snorkeling and you see coral. It looked really similar to that. And he gave me a couple pieces of that. I kept it for a long time. Who knows? It was probably, who knows what was in it. Unfortunately, I don't have those anymore. After Rocketdyne, I'm not really sure what he did for work. I know his last job was a limo driver. Maybe he was doing security then as well. Just a guess. He developed lung cancer at age 69, and from what I was told, he shot himself in the head during his treatment. Sorry to catch you off guard there. But that's... I never saw the death certificate. I was talked out of going to the scene, and then his wife had the funeral without telling me about it. I later visited his grave at the Bakersfield National Cemetery in California. I always wondered about his email address. It was Argo 70 something. I can't remember the exact number, but it was Argo. I didn't know anything about Argo. And he was kind of a jokester, and he was the guy that could remember every single joke. But I asked him, I said, what does Argo mean? You know, what is that? And he goes, Argo, fuck yourself. And that was just kind of his sense of humor, but that was his way of telling me I'm not telling you what it means. You know. After learning about Argo, I sometimes wondered if he was involved in the situation in Tehran. He had to have a high clearance considering all of the places he worked. All right, my mom. One of my mom's first jobs was in the blueprint room for the radar and tracking system for the F-111 Aardvark. I can't remember the name of the company that she worked for. Last time she was here, I was asking her some questions, and she told me, and I can't remember the name of the company that actually worked on that, but that was one of her first jobs here in California. She then went to work for the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration facility in Palmdale, California, also a very high security facility. She became head of personnel there. So that place was right next to Plant 42. They weren't too far away. And anything that was flying around Plant 42 and Edwards Air Force Base in that vicinity, they would cover all of that air traffic. And to even work at that facility, I'm sure your clearance had to be pretty high, because they're monitoring air traffic for the most top secret aircraft in the world. And yeah. Let me back up here. Okay. Oh, also a highly secured facility. She became the head of personnel there. During the early 80s, Ronald Reagan fired air traffic controllers that went on strike against the federal government. I was 6. My mom was tasked with firing 220 of them at that facility. Being a single mom, she took me to work with her after school and on weekends during the strike. I got to know that place pretty well. I even got to visit the control room one time. One of the controllers let me sit at his workstation, wear his headphones, and listen to the air traffic. He turned the functions off and let me use the little roller ball and pretended I was controlling the airplanes. That was really cool. I remember that vividly. It was a dark room, all the air traffic controllers in there, just like you've seen on the movies, if you've ever seen anything like that. Talking perfectly calm to all these airplanes, and monitoring everything and making sure that everybody, would take off and land safe, get to where they're going. So the plant manager's name was Dave Anderson. I remember sitting in his office while he was talking to my mom about work stuff. He ran that facility. He was the chief out at that place. And he was actually in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He was I don't even know what term to use anymore. I don't want to say the black guy. He was the African American man that was in the scene in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that was playing the air traffic controller, which he was the head air traffic controller, basically. So, and he was in some other movies as well. Let's see. Put this video is from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Dave is the African American controller featured in the scene. The control room they are in is the one that I've been in, and then I put a link for the video there. If you look up Close Encounters of the Third Kind, there's all kinds of videos on YouTube and stuff like that. You can find that on there. And so the whole air traffic controller thing, firing all those air traffic controllers, I wondered if my mom ended up getting targeted after that. We did move around a lot after that. And, now that I know what this is and I know what to look for, some of the memories that I have back then, yeah, she could have been targeted, but I'm not sure about that. She transferred to the FAA Burbank facility for 2 years after that. We moved to Valencia, California, just down the road from the Getty Museum. and close to Magic Mountain. I could ride my bike to Magic Mountain. Had a season pass, and yeah, so we were there for 2 years. For some reason, she decided to leave the FAA altogether, and uh, she left the FAA to work for the U.S. Forest Service in Clovis, California. So we moved to Clovis, which is Central California. She was there for a few years and then transferred to the IRS Fresno facility. I can't remember really how long she worked at the Forest Service, but she was the head of personnel at that facility also. And uh, she just ended up transferring to the IRS. So she was at that facility at the Fresno facility for the IRS for a few years, and then transferred with the IRS again to Nashville, Tennessee. So we moved to Mount Juliet, Tennessee, and my mom worked in Nashville for the IRS. We were there for 2 years. We were having some issues, her and I, teenager, mom, was getting gaslighted. I didn't know it then, but now that I look back, getting gaslighted. And, I think I was acting out over the years of trauma-based mind control and psychological abuse. So I moved back to California myself, actually, and my mom moved back to California as well, back to the IRS Fresno location. So she was in personnel her whole career. She is now retired and living back in the small town in Minnesota that she grew up in. Okay, me, this first job, not that big of a deal. But I did have, anyway. I worked as a skycap at the Fresno Yosemite International Airport, which they have maybe like 1 or 2 international flights. It used to be called FAT, Fresno Air Terminal. A lot of people didn't like that. But they finally changed it to the Fresno Yosemite International Airport, because a lot of people fly in from all over the world to go to that airport. I checked in luggage and provided boarding passes for passengers. We were also responsible for transporting and helping disabled passengers board the airplane. If you've ever been to the airport and checked in with a skycap back when you could do that before 9/11, you know what that is. It was kind of cool. We made tips. That wasn't that big of a deal, but I was there for about 5 years. I joined the Air Force in 1999 with the 144th Fighter Wing. I attended basic training in San Antonio, Texas. Next was training at Lewis F. Garland Fire Academy at Goodfellow Air Force Base in San Angelo, Texas. So at that base, there's an Intel training facility. And I had some interactions with some of the Intel folks there that were gang stalking me. And like I said, I had no idea what that was then. After that, I returned back to the 144th Fighter Wing and was hired as a full-time crash fire rescue firefighter within a few months. I worked at that station for almost 5 years and made my way up to engineer 4 different vehicles. I drove the P-19 crash truck. That was my favorite vehicle. I drove that the most. And that's a CFR, crash fire rescue truck, that has AFFF aqueous film forming fluorocarbons. That's what you spray on the runway. If you have an aircraft that's coming in, you need to have it foam down so it doesn't spark and ignite the fuel. And you also spray it on an aircraft if it's on fire. I drove the P-24 fire engine. That's a basic fire truck. It's not a ladder truck. It had ladders on it, but it's just an engine. We call it an engine. And drove the P-18 water tender. That's for resupply, drafting out of ponds and stuff like that, etc. And the rescue vehicle. I never drove the rescue vehicle. Yeah, when we did the barriers is like the on a Navy ship. They have these ropes, big metal ropes that go across and the hook catches onto that. So we had those at the end of the runway, and I would drive the rescue truck out on the weekends to go check the barriers to make sure that they were run by diesel motors. We had to run the diesel motor up and check to make sure that was running and that all the systems were working properly in case the F-16s had brake failure and weren't gonna be able to stop by the end of the runway. They'd drop that hook, catch onto the barrier, and stop the aircraft. And so that's about the only time I drove the rescue truck. But I was in the rescue truck quite a bit for medical aid. We would work medical aid at the airport, go help people that were injured. I remember one time specifically, there was an older lady that fell down the escalator. And she was just cut up. You know, your skin gets real thin when you get older, and she fell down the escalator and rolled down that thing. And we showed up, and it was, I don't know why that was one of my calls that stood out in my mind the most. You know, it wasn't too big of a deal. She was okay, but I decided to leave the fire department and was asked to move into what was the photo shop at the time. I attended the Defense Information School at Fort Meade, Maryland, to become a multimedia illustrator. So at that base, Fort Meade, Maryland, it might sound familiar to some of you, the NSA is right there. The track we'd go run around to do PT was close enough to the NSA facility that they told us, do not go off the track. Don't run outside of the track. People pop out of the woods and tell you to go back. And that was real. So second base that I attended, that was also on an Intel base. Back up. So I attended the Defense Information School at Fort Meade, Maryland to become a multimedia illustrator. I worked at the Air National Guard base on traditional status, TDYs, deployments, and special military orders. TDY is tour duty. Yeah, I can't even remember what that acronym stands for. We just always called it TDY. TDY is when you go on a trip somewhere, and it's not like a vacation. You're going for a specific mission, but it's not a deployment. It's not a deployment to where you're in theater or anything like that. I performed photo, video, and broadcast journalism for almost 10 years during this time. Oh, for almost 10 years. During this time, I returned to Fort Meade for broadcast voice training. You'd think I'd be a little better at this right now if I went to school for that. I'm tired. And back to San Antonio for weapons system video, or WSV training. I would view and edit films for the F-16 Fighting Falcon, video footage, and redact classified information from the videos, telling you this isn't classified. The information on those films will be classified. So I just couldn't tell you any of that stuff. But basically, when you see the heads-up display, or you see the camera footage from an F-16 or any military aircraft, and you see what's going down on the ground, there's like all these different little numbers. Sometimes those numbers might be blacked out, and that's just, just information you can't see. I mostly traveled to training missions to document the event. I would film, narrate, and edit short videos covering our mission. A lot of times I would interview colonels and generals who were in command for the specific mission. That was exactly what it sounds like. Whatever we had going on, I would be in contact with the commander of the mission, and I would write out some questions and set up a little video that would basically describe what's going on, back to show everybody back at the base. We'd take it to commander's call. Sometimes videos would get posted on Air Force Network, stuff like that. Just an informative little short documentary news piece. The highest clearance I held was secret, and that's the lowest clearance you can receive. Top secrets after that, and a bunch of letters, and then, if I remember correctly, Never mind about that part. Uh, my only time in the Middle East was at Al Dhafra Air Force Base near Abu Dhabi. And that was for airport. Now I'm going backwards here a little bit. This was the fire department. But I went to Abu Dhabi to Al Dhafra Air Force Base. It was out miles away from Abu Dhabi, and we lived in tents. And when you think of living in tents, it wasn't like, in the Marine Corps or Army goes out and they have a little A-frame tent that they're living in that goes in their backpack. We had these large temper tents. They had an air conditioner hooked up to them. There was actually swimming pools that they had built. They were like these above ground pools. And on your time off, you could go over there, and they had a gym. It wasn't bad. It was pretty nice um, for living in tents. Somebody had somehow got a leather couch in town and brought it back to the tent, so we've had a couch in our place, and we had a TV. We'd watch Al Jazeera mostly, but it was comfortable for being deployed. Deployed, yeah, it's a place you'd want to go. Uh, yeah, I did that for airport firefighting support during Operation Noble Eagle. Uh, I traveled to several other locations around the United States for training and other special orders. So anytime I had to do something for the base, do some upgrade training, like work on the SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus for the firefighters. I was in charge of that program for a while. Uh, I shouldn't say I was in charge of it. There was two of us that were in charge of that, Alan Martin and myself. We did all the SCBA stuff, and I'll say right now, Alan was way better at that than I was. He was more meticulous and better attention to detail at the time. Be a lot better at that now, but that was just one of the things I went for training for in Albany, Schenectady. Did a lot of different things like that. So now, other family members that we had I didn't write this part down, I'm just going to tell you this. Other family members that we had aunts and uncles that worked at Skunk Works. I think all three of my aunts worked out there at Skunk Works. I know at least two of them did. And my aunt's husband was one of the higher ups. I don't know exactly what his position was. I don't know exactly what he did. Never really talked about it. But he worked for Lockheed, and I think he might have worked. And I'm pretty sure it was just Lockheed Martin. I might be missing on that one, but that was, I was really young. It was a long time ago. But he moved his way up, and he ended up going up to Seattle, I believe. And they're still up there in that area in Tri-Cities. So pretty much my whole family in Lancaster all had clearances and all worked on DoD projects or in the military um, or in a secret government capacity. With me running around out on at Plant 42 when I was a kid, my dad taking me out to the fire station, riding around with him in the fire truck, maybe seeing some things I shouldn't have. I'm not sure. I don't know. I know in school I wasn't paying attention a lot. I was drawing pictures of jets and spacecraft kind of looking things. And, running around the FAA facility out there. I don't know. Maybe they think that I saw something that I wasn't supposed to see. I don't remember anything specific that would be in like a movie. I didn't see any aliens or anything like that. If I did, they wiped my memory. I got flashy thing like on Men in Black or something. And I know part of the trauma-based mind control program will erase memories from people. So I don't know what happened with all of that. But this history with all this stuff could have had something to do with my targeting, with the surreal events that happened throughout my life that were repetitious over and over and over and over again. Guess that's all I have for that. Sorry that wasn't a little smoother. Long day. Just thought I would share that with everybody. I'm trying to share as much as I can, what I can, while I'm still here, and able to do videos like this on my phone, and have the freedom to just kind of put this stuff out there for posterity, for the future. Thank you all for listening. Hope it was interesting. Have a good night.